What would you do if you discovered that someone had intentionally tampered with your disabled child's wheelchair? How far would you go to seek justice, particularly when your daughter almost lost her life due to someone's inhuman act? And what if the person was the most influential person in your entire neighborhood? Even today, my blood freezes at the mere thought of that day, seeing my 14-year-old daughter Isabella lose control of her wheelchair on a hill, careening directly towards approaching traffic. In that moment of terror, I met her eye. 1 second more, and I would have lost her, just as I lost her mother. Let me bring you back to where this horror began, and how the woman who thought she could murder my daughter and get away with it finally got her comeuppance. My name is Jackson Harlow. Having spent 15 years working tactical operations for the FBI, I thought I'd seen the worst of humanity. I've glared into the eyes of terrorists, gone undercover in organized crime syndicates, taken down human trafficking rings. I've hunted serial killers and broken up domestic terrorist cells. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for Patricia Lancaster. She wasn't hiding in the shadows or wearing a mask. No, the real face of evil was smiling at block parties, organizing flower contests, and ruling the Oakage Estates Homeowners Association with an iron fist hidden in a velvet glove. 6 months back, my daughter Bella and I relocated to Oakage Estates, a posh Boston suburb with immaculate lawns and homes from a magazine cover. Having lost my wife Sarah to fast-moving breast cancer 2 years ago, I was badly in need of a new beginning for both of us, someplace secure, with decent schools, clean roads, and above all, a community that would look out for Bella. Bella has spinal muscular atrophy, SMA, and depends on an electric wheelchair to get around. But despite what her body can't do, Bella is the most brilliant, courageous person I've ever known. She never asks for sympathy. Her mind works faster than most adults I've met. At just 14, she's already a coding genius, breezing through advanced placement courses and tutoring high school seniors in computer science. Her teachers refer to her as a once-in-a-lifetime mind. I simply refer to her as my hero. Our first week in Oakage was like a dream. Neighbors brought casseroles and welcome baskets over. Everyone smiled, introduced themselves, and welcomed us into their home. Mrs. Abernathy, 2 doors away, made cinnamon rolls that filled our kitchen with the scent of heaven. The Johnsons invited us to their barbecue. Terrence Washington, the retired auto mechanic who works across the street, volunteered to assist me in organizing our garage. All seemed friendly and kind, with the exception of one. Patricia Lancaster didn't provide smiles or freshly baked treats. She arrived carrying a 20-page HOA rulebook and a thinly veiled home inspection. Standing in our foyer dressed in her silver hair, perfectly coiffed, wrinkle-free designer suit, and pearls reflecting the light, she resembled someone's elegant grandmother. But her eyes were sharp, cold, scanning our boxes and the temporary ramp we'd set up for Bella. "And we have very high standards here in Oakage, well," she said, her voice honeyed and false, while her gaze dissected every inch of our entryway. "I hope you'll be making the necessary adjustments to suit neighborhood aesthetics." I smiled and nodded, but having been in law enforcement for 15 years, my instincts were screaming. Patricia Lancaster was more than a nuisance. She was danger disguised in beauty and fine perfume. "Of course," Wajena said. "We're glad to be a part of such a lovely community." Her smile never reached her eyes as she presented me with the rulebook. Her polished nails nearly scraped against my skin. "I saw the temporary installation for your daughter," she remarked, looking in the direction of the aluminum ramp. "You will have to file the necessary forms for anything permanent. The architectural committee is very strict about visible changes." The manner in which she emphasized the word temporary made it acutely apparent. She completely anticipated it would disappear, disabled child or not. And when she used particular, it seemed more of a threat than a guideline. "I'll make sure to use the proper protocol," I said, forcing my face to remain bland. Bella, always keen-eyed, sat quietly in her wheelchair, observing everything. Her keen eyes did not miss anything. Once Patricia had gone, Bella wheeled up alongside me. "She doesn't like me, does she, Dad?" My heart broke a little bit. "She just doesn't know you yet, sweetheart. Once she does, she'll love you, like everyone else does." But I was mistaken. So very painfully mistaken. The real fight began when I put in plans for a permanent, ADA-accessible wheelchair ramp at the front of our house. There were 3 steps to our front door, a hurdle that became a mountain for Bella's chair. The ramp was professionally engineered, unobtrusive, structurally sound, and necessary for my daughter's independence. It was identical to our colonial-style house in every aspect. Same materials, same color scheme. I even included landscaping designs so it would blend into the front yard. 3 days later, I got a denial. "The intended structure is at odds with Oakage aesthetic norms," the letter stated in cold, formal tones. All exterior alterations have to maintain the neighborhood's architectural integrity. I immediately demanded a formal meeting with the HOA board. Patricia presided over the gathering, seated at the head of a long mahogany table inside the community center. 4 other board members sat beside her, most looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Only one seemed actively engaged. Douglas Wheaton, a former attorney with a receding hairline and a constant scowl. He nodded along with every word Patricia spoke. Later, I'd find out he wasn't just her ally. He was her enabler, in more ways than one. Mr. Harlow, Patricia started, a hint of pretend sympathy in her voice. Though we can sympathize with you, regulations are there for a purpose. Your suggested ramp would be visible to the public and could serve to lower property value. I inhaled deeply, maintaining a level tone. Ms. Lancaster, the Americans with Disabilities Act specifically says that reasonable accommodations are allowed, even in the presence of HOA covenants. My daughter needs this ramp to safely enter our home. The ADA doesn't supersede HOA covenants, she cut in, waving her manicured hand as if shooing away an annoyance. Other neighbors with special needs families have made accommodations without upending neighborhood standards. The way she said special needs made my skin crawl. Her smile stayed fixed, but her eyes, those cold, assessing eyes, betrayed the control she craved. I'd seen that same look on the faces of suspects who relished holding power over others. My daughter has the right to go into her home, I stated sternly, wrestling with my temper. The ramp will be built to code, tasteful, and it's under federal law. This is not optional. Patricia's smile disappeared. It was just like that. The mask was dropped. Perhaps Oakage is not the community for your needs. The threat was thin as paper, but the implication was clear. Individuals like Bella were not welcome here. One of the board members, a younger woman named Amara Patel, finally had a word. I believe we should reconsider. It's a fair request, and the design looks right. Patricia glared at her like she was a puddle of ice water that needed to solidify into frozen lava. We'll vote, she said short-temperedly. All in favor of denial? Only Patricia and Douglas raised their hands. Somehow, though, when the official meeting minutes were published, they indicated a unanimous vote of denial against my application. When I asked the inconsistency, Patricia had a simple answer. As president, she asserted final say over issues of aesthetic taste, so I constructed the ramp anyway. According to AD law, I was within my rights. It took 2 days to build, and before the concrete had even hardened, the notices began. First were the fines, $100 a day for unauthorized modifications. Then came the certified letters, warning of legal action. Patricia even held an emergency HOA meeting, which she referred to as the Harlow situation. She attempted to mobilize the neighborhood against us. She circulated copies of ugly ramps from other neighborhoods, suggesting that ours would bring down local property value. So do we want Oak Ridge Estates to become a clinical facility? Patricia asked the assembled neighbors, her tone laced with indignation. What's next? Hospital beds on front lawns? Medical equipment out in plain sight for all passersby? But Patricia had misjudged. She underestimated both our neighborhood and the subtle impact my daughter had already made on those who'd met her. Some of the neighbors, headed by Amaro, rose up in our defense. Among them was Terrence Washington, our 72-year-old neighbor, who laboriously got to his feet using a cane for support. I've lived in Oak Ridge for 30 years, he started, his deep voice slicing through the tension like a knife. And never once have I ever been ashamed of my community. Until tonight. He scanned the room. That young girl? She helped me set up my new computer just last week after my own grandchildren said they were too busy. She didn't see an old man. She saw someone who needed a hand. And now we're sitting here debating whether she should be allowed to enter her own home with dignity. He paused. Shame on us if we let that happen. The atmosphere in the room began to change. You could sense it, the flow of opinion reversing against Patricia. And from the anger blazing in her eyes, she could sense it too. She suddenly called the meeting to a close, stating that the issue would be discussed with counsel. As I was leaving, I could feel her glare searing my back. That was when the nightmare really started. One day I received a call at the office from Bella, her voice strained with fear. Dad, something's wrong with the ramp. It feels wobbly. I left everything behind and rushed home from the FBI field office. What I discovered sent shivers down my spine. A few of the support bolts had been loosened, enough to make the ramp unsafe. Not enough to result in an immediate failure, but sufficient to critically harm someone with repeated use. This wasn't wear and tear. This was deliberate sabotage. That evening, I put up security cameras, visible ones guarding our primary access points and hidden ones monitoring blind spots, such as the ramp in our garage. My FBI training took over. Establish surveillance, collect intelligence, determine the threat. 3 days passed before Terrence phoned. Jackson, you'll want to see what my cameras recorded last night. I caught something you need to see. The grainy black and white video revealed a figure in dark clothing walking toward our ramp, moving with careful deliberation. They knelt down, looked over their shoulder, and began to tamper with the structure. The face wasn't visible, but the gait, the posture, it was Patricia Lancaster. She walked like someone with a mission, cautious, practiced. I secured the ramp at once and doubled our security detail, but I didn't take her on, not yet. Years in the FBI had taught me one thing more than anything else: move too early and you give away your hand. No, what I needed was irrefutable evidence and a complete picture of who I was working with. So I dug deeper. With databases inaccessible to the common citizen, I performed a complete background check on Patricia Lancaster. What I discovered sent shivers down my spine. 5 years previous, Patricia was fired from a high-level job at a large corporation following several employees' disability discrimination complaints. She settled out of court, keeping all that behind non-disclosure agreement. And worse, digging through sealed documents, thanks to retired FBI friends, I uncovered her juvenile record. Patricia was charged with assault at age 17 for beating up a classmate, a girl with cerebral palsy. This wasn't just an overbearing HOA president who was intoxicated by power. This was a woman with a long, volatile history of targeting individuals with disabilities. And now, she was fixated on my daughter. Then came the escalation. It was Tuesday afternoon. Bella had ridden the accessible bus to school, and I was working from home reading case files. Then, out of nowhere, a quiet alert appeared on my phone. One of my covert cameras had picked up movement in the garage. I clicked open the live feed. There she was, Patricia Lancaster, as plain as day. She was checking over Bella's wheelchair. She looked around nervously, then dipped into her pocket and produced a pair of wire cutters. With skilled fingers, she snipped a portion of the brake cable, just enough to make it weak. Then she taped over the damage with electrical tape, making it almost impossible to detect. My hands shook with rage. Each strand of my being screamed to rush downstairs and arrest her in place, to make her account for what she had just done. But my training intervened. No anger, no impulsive act, safeguard the evidence, construct the case, safeguard Bella. First, I phoned my FBI supervisor. Then I called Bella's school and ordered them to keep her inside until I came to pick her up, but I was too late. Undefined, I'd forgotten. It was early dismissal for teacher development. It had been noted definitely on the calendar, but I had not looked that morning. Bella had already gone on the adaptive school bus that brought her down to the end of our block, a route she traveled daily alone, proud to have fought so hard for such independence. My heart pounded against my chest as I leaped into my own car, fingering Bella's cell with shaky hands. No response. I called once more, my damp palms clinging to the steering wheel as I sped through streets in the neighborhood, searching sidewalks for any indication of her presence. Then I spotted it, her wheelchair. It was careening down the steep hill that led to the main road at the entrance to our community, gaining speed, too fast and too risky. Bella's face was contorted in horror. She was desperately pushing at the controls, her little hands doing all they could to activate the brakes, but they didn't budge. The malfunctioning system couldn't stop her. And at the foot of that hill, Route 28, a busy highway filled with afternoon traffic, cars and trucks whizzing by at 50 miles per hour, entirely oblivious to the disaster hurtling directly toward them. Time appeared to drag on forever. I was too far away to help, too far to shout, to warn her, to stop what was coming. The wheelchair was rocketing downhill, at a speed it was never built to handle, straight toward incoming traffic. Then, in a moment I'll never forget, Amara Patel, just arriving home from her hospital shift, still in her scrubs, saw what was unfolding. She didn't hesitate. She ran out of her car, didn't even take the time to shut the door, and stood at the foot of the hill right in front of Bella. In a flash of instinct and impeccable timing, Amara dove at the wheelchair, grabbing its side and pushing it off track with her body weight. They bounced hard onto a neighbor's lawn. The hit knocked Bella off the chair, but Amara fell the distance. I didn't even realize she was here until I burst through the swing set, dashing over the grass. Already, she had Bella in hand, her words steady, calm, professional. Bella's wrist was twisted awry, and she shook in shock, but nothing more. Unbelievably, there were tears dripping down her face as I crushed her to my chest. "The brakes wouldn't work, Dad," she wept on my shoulder. I was trying to brake. I knew I was doing something wrong, but it just kept accelerating. I gazed over at her wheelchair, tipped over onto its side on the lawn. The brake cord was now completely severed, tearfully stretched from the violence of her straining to brake. "This wasn't an accident," Amara said gently, observing my expression. Her medical scrubs were ripped and grass-stained from the fall. "I know exactly what this is," I said, my voice low, steady. deadly calm, the same kind of calm I employed in the field, in hostage situations and high-risk raids. That quiet, dangerous calm that indicated someone had crossed a line they couldn't return from. That evening, after Bella had been assessed, administered minor pain medication, and was finally resting in my bedroom where I could keep her near, I sat down and watched each surveillance tape. There it was. Several different angles of Patricia Lancaster entering our garage and messing with Bella's wheelchair. Plain as day recordings of her at the ramp, twice, destroying the ramp. Terrence's video showing her lurking near our home in the dead of night. I had it all. But this had moved beyond just evidence and charges. This was personal. My daughter had come within inches of dying. I made the call, not through official channels, not yet, but to the 4 members of my FBI unit I trusted above anyone else. By the morning, they were going through Patricia Lancaster's history, her finances, her contacts, her entire record. What we uncovered made my stomach turn. This was not an isolated incident. Over her 6-year presidency as HOA president, Patricia had subtly evicted 3 families with members who were disabled. All had suffered accidents and intimidation. All had departed under duress. Financial inspections revealed suspicious expenditure and missing HOA money, indicators of embezzlement. And worse, we found out that she'd sabotaged a wheelchair the previous year, an older resident who had a strange fall and left shortly afterward. Douglas Wheaton, her smarmy co-conspirator on the board, was involved too. He'd been assisting her in concealing the money trail, accepting kickbacks masquerading as consulting fees. The corruption ran deeper than I dreaded. Rather than facing Patricia head-on, I asked for a special emergency HOA meeting, presenting it as an attempt to settle our recurring problem. Patricia obliged, likely believing that she'd get one more opportunity to embarrass me in public. She had the audacity to even send a scribbled-out note over her concerns regarding Bella's accident, proposing to begin a fund to help us buy a safer wheelchair. That Friday night, the community center was filled. News of Bella's close encounter had traveled, and the audience buzzed with anxiety. All chairs were occupied. Patricia, in character, took center stage, sitting comfortably at the front table next to Douglas. She and Douglas conferred softly and would glance over and smirk at me now and again. Amara smiled at me and nodded subtly, encouraging me. Terrence occupied a seat near the front, his arms wrapped tightly around his chest, burning a hole into Patricia's cranium. Patricia cleared her throat, adjusted her blouse, and called the meeting to order. "We're here to discuss persistent abuses by the Harlow family," Patricia started, speaking formally, riffling through a stack of papers as if sitting in judgment for a corporate boardroom instead of a neighborhood gathering. "But first, I'd like to express our common concern about Isabella's tragic accident. Maybe this serves to illustrate the value of correct safety gear and procedures in houses with special needs." The arrogance of her words made my blood boil. She was shaming Bella, shaming my daughter for a crash that she herself had engineered. The victim blaming dripping from her affected tone of concern was more than I could stomach. "Actually," I stood, my voice ringing out in the room, "we're here to talk about something a lot more serious." I strolled to the front of the room and hooked up my laptop to the projector. The chatter of the audience ceased, with tension hanging thick in the air. Patricia's self-satisfied smirk hardly wavered. "Yet, 3 days ago," I continued, my tone firm, "my daughter came close to dying. The brakes on her wheelchair malfunctioned, rolling her toward Route 28. She was seconds from being hit by cars coming the other way." A chorus of gasps swept the room. Patricia's expression continued to be one of habitual calm, but sitting next to her, Douglas was fidgeting visibly in his seat. "This wasn't an accident," I went on. "The brake cable was cut. Someone did that. Someone who has a track record of terrorizing disabled residents in this neighborhood. Someone who doesn't believe people like my daughter belong in this community." "That's a serious charge," Patricia said, her tone dripping with insincerity. "If that's the case, we ought to be concerned. Maybe we should beef up security patrols." "I could not possibly agree more," I stated, meeting her gaze, "which is why I have evidence." I clicked to the first video. The room went silent as a tomb as crystal-clear video dominated the screen. Patricia Lancaster, coming into my garage, messing with Bella's wheelchair, her actions calculated and rehearsed, sabotaging the very device that my daughter's life was reliant on. All the color left Patricia's face. That's been tampered with," she stuttered. "That's not me. Someone's trying to set me up." I clicked to the second video, her again, at our wheelchair ramp, huddled beneath the security light, easily seen as she removed bolts. And then a third video, recorded by Terrence's camera. Patricia standing outside our house at night, looking over her shoulder before melting into the darkness. "This is outrageous," Patricia snapped, standing up. Her gleaming mask was cracking. "Douglas, tell them about digital manipulation. This can't be admissible." Douglas seemed to wish the floor would open up and take him in. He remained silent. His eyes darted to the door. I've had some visitors ask to join us, I said matter-of-factly. Two officers in uniform entered the room, accompanied by my FBI manager. Before we proceed, I added, I should introduce myself properly. My name is Special Agent Jackson Harlow, FBI Tactical Operations. I turned back to the room, to the stunned faces now watching Patricia. What you've just seen is video evidence of Patricia Lancaster committing multiple felonies, including attempted murder of a disabled minor. Patricia made a run for the door, but the officers were already there. One stepped into her path, blocking the exit. Gone was her composed facade. In its place was something raw, feral, unhinged. "This is crazy," she yelled. "You don't have the right. Do you know who I am? These individuals trust me, not some stranger with a disabled kid." The room flinched. Even her last few supporters were shaken by the venom in her voice. "You're just verifying what many of us suspected," I said, my voice low and even. I advanced to the next slide, her sealed juvenile record and the facts of her termination from her last job. "You're a bully with a long history of violence and discrimination against the disabled. You almost killed my daughter because you couldn't stand to look at a wheelchair ramp from your kitchen window." The room exploded. Gasps, murmurs, indignation. Patricia lunged at Douglas, who was already backing away from her. He attempted to slip away silently, but Terrence Washington stood tall in the doorway. Kane rooted firmly in his way with grim resolve. Other neighbors gathered behind him, forming an unofficial wall of community opposition, a line Patricia couldn't cross. The officers stepped in, cuffing her wrists. "You'll be sorry," she spat at me, her anger simmering. "This is a respectable neighborhood. Individuals like your daughter bring down property values. We were just fine until you moved in. You do not belong in this area." They rang in the stunned quiet. "My daughter," I replied softly, "has more guts, smarts, and compassion in her small finger than you have in your whole body. And now everyone in this neighborhood knows exactly what kind of person you are." As the officers took Patricia away, still shouting, still cursing, a frail elderly woman approached me, her eyes glassy with tears. "My son has multiple sclerosis," she whispered. "We've kept it hidden for years. We were afraid of her. Thank you. Thank you for stopping her." One by one, more neighbors came forward, telling their stories. Stories of intimidation, discrimination, vandalism, all carried out or sanctioned by Patricia Lancaster. Her ideal of a perfect community had always been one that was free from difference, from outward signs of disability or weakness, but no longer. Patricia was indicted on charges of attempted murder, assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, several counts of property damage, and federal civil rights violations. As investigators continued to dig, forensic accountants found more than $200,000 stolen from HOA coffers, laundered gradually over 5 years through shell vendors and fake consulting services. I advanced to the next slide, her sealed juvenile record and the facts of her termination from her last job. "You're a bully with a long history of violence and discrimination against the disabled. You almost killed my daughter because you couldn't stand to look at a wheelchair ramp from your kitchen window." The room exploded. Gasps, murmurs, indignation. Patricia lunged at Douglas, who was already backing away from her. He attempted to slip away silently, but Terrence Washington stood tall in the doorway. Kane rooted firmly in his way with grim resolve. Other neighbors gathered behind him, forming an unofficial wall of community opposition, a line Patricia couldn't cross. The officers stepped in, cuffing her wrists. "You'll be sorry," she spat at me, her anger simmering. "This is a respectable neighborhood. Individuals like your daughter bring down property value. We were just fine until you moved in. You do not belong in this area." They rang in the stunned quiet. "My daughter," I replied softly, "has more guts, smarts, and compassion in her small finger than you have in your whole body. And now everyone in this neighborhood knows exactly what kind of person you are." As the officers took Patricia away, still shouting, still cursing, a frail elderly woman approached me, her eyes glassy with tears. "My son has multiple sclerosis," she whispered. "We've kept it hidden for years. We were afraid of her. Thank you. Thank you for stopping her." One by one, more neighbors came forward, telling their stories. Stories of intimidation, discrimination, vandalism, all carried out or sanctioned by Patricia Lancaster. Her ideal of a perfect community had always been one that was free from difference, from outward signs of disability or weakness, but no longer. Patricia was indicted on charges of attempted murder, assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, several counts of property damage, and federal civil rights violations. As investigators continued to dig, forensic accountants found more than $200,000 stolen from HOA coffers, laundered gradually over 5 years through shell vendors and fake consulting services. In the practice, my colleagues would say that I was more threatening with the accessibility rules than they ever were with a tactical rifle. They are likely correct. Nowadays, Terrence and I are close friends. He shows me around classic cars in his garage. I assist him in navigating the ever more digital world. Amara visits frequently, always with a container of home-cooked Indian food and a shot of medical advice. The same community Patricia attempted to gatekeep has never been more inclusive. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that evil doesn't always come dressed in a mask. Oftentimes, it disguises itself within rulebooks and false smiles. It sports pearl necklaces and wields a clipboard. But justice, true justice, is not fooled. Patricia Lancaster believes she was preying on a vulnerable child. She never thought that child had a father trained to take apart threats exponentially more complex than an angry HOA president. She never knew that her actual punishment wouldn't be jail. It would be knowing that what she did brought together a neighborhood she attempted to isolate. Now, on a daily basis, I see Bella glide down our sidewalks with ease, smiling at neighbors who have come to know her name and welcome her presence. I observe Amara, Terrence, and dozens of others who joined with us when it counted most. And I am reminded, for every Patricia in the world, there are scores of others who will create ramps rather than walls. So if you ever experienced harsh discrimination or were made to feel like you don't belong in your own community, keep Bella's tale in mind. Justice is delayed but not denied, and sometimes the one struggling most for it is the very unassuming FBI agent living next door. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to HOA Memoirs for more true stories of justice served. Have you ever experienced discrimination in your neighborhood? Tell us about it in the comments below. We want to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from today? How would you react if you were in a situation like ours? Let us know, and we'll see you in the next shocking HOA battle.